Coming up next on Insights on PBS Hawaii, should the 30-meter telescope be built? Aloha and welcome to Insights on PBS Hawaii. I'm Malia Mattoch, your host for tonight's show. Hours ago, the Office of Hawaiian Affairs rescinded support for the 30-meter telescope. Testifiers at OHA's public hearing convinced trustees that the potential for scientific advancement might not be worth the environmental and cultural risk to Mauna Kea, though OHA did not go so far as to oppose the project. OHA's action came after weeks of protest brought construction of the 18-story telescope to a temporary halt. Plans for the $1.4 billion telescope were approved in a process that began 7 years ago, but some opponents are questioning the stewardship of Mauna Kea by the University of Hawaii. Tonight on Insights, should the 30-meter telescope be built? We encourage viewers to join tonight's conversation by calling 973-1000 if you live on Oahu, or 800-238-4847 if you're calling from a neighbor island. If you have a smartphone, tablet, or computer, you can watch Insights streamed live at pbshawaii.org. Just click on the Insights title, or you can find us on Twitter at PBS Hawaii. Please use the PBS Insights hashtag to be sure we see your tweet. Now to our panel. Paul Coleman is a Native Hawaiian astrophysicist at the University of Hawaii's Institute for Astronomy. He supports construction of the 30-meter telescope, which he thinks could benefit Native Hawaiians and the state as a whole. Kealoha Pisciotta is president of Mauna Kea Anaina Ho, a spiritual organization for people with a connection to Mauna Kea. She has become the spokesperson for the Mauna Kea Hui, representing those opposed to the telescope. John Osorio is board president for KAHEA, the Hawaii-Environmental alliance that opposes construction of the 30-meter telescope out of concern for the biological and cultural resources at the summit areas. Richard Ha is the founder and president of Hamakua Springs Country Farms in East Hawaii. Mr. Ha is at first opposed plans for the observatory, but has since reversed his position and has testified at public meetings in support of the telescope. Thank you all for being here. By random draw, Ms. Pisciotta, you get the first question.
Okay.
Could we get your response to the action from OHA today?
Oh, regarding OHA, well, it's pretty disappointing, but it's been disappointing, so I'm not any more disappointed than I've been thus far. We've been asking, John and I are also litigants, right? So we've been asking help from OHA to help fund our lawsuits. Because OHA, why? Because OHA is legally mandated to protect not only our rights but our resources, both of which are threatened. Both have not been, you know, for example, the rent issue is a long-standing issue. The university and the international telescopes still pay $1. While the university as a 5F purpose can pay only $1, they can't extend that privilege to foreign nations and foreign governments or foreign corporations. So yeah, I'm disappointed they're not going to help.
You're disappointed that they didn't choose to oppose the project, that they only rescinded. Was that
yeah, and that they should go further. I mean, they can't be leaders, you know, if they're sitting in the back of the bus and the people are leading.
Dr. Osorio?
Essentially what they did was they went back to the situation a year ago when actually it was at that time KAHEA and other organizations were trying to get OHA to actively oppose it. And we were pointing out the fact, you know, the fact of the master lease. You know, OHA gets a 20% prorated share on the revenues that are derived from ceded lands. And we asked them to take a really serious look at this. And we're, you know, very, very more disappointed that they voted to support the project. All they have done essentially is go back to where they were a year ago, and we wonder, you know, we're trying to figure out exactly what they're saying to the public and to Kanaka Maoli at this point.
And we're older then. Mr. Ha, you testified today. What was your reaction to what happened today?
Well, I was sort of disappointed because I really wanted them to support the 30-meter telescope. And where I come from is I am concerned about the Big Island and the fact that we have the lowest median family income. in the state, of the counties. And the Kona side is higher, the averages, and on the east side is even lower. You know, there's, like Pohoa School Complex, for example, 90% of the students participate in the free and subsidized lunch program. So I see the value of the education fund and employment and stuff like that.
And the education fund being one that the telescope would support. I believe it's called THINK. Is that the, yeah, and so that's the fund you refer to. Yeah. Dr. Coleman, as a Native Hawaiian and a scientist, why do you support this? And what was your reaction to what happened at OHA today?
I was also disappointed. So it's very funny. OHA gave out a poll or something where they asked 4 questions, and one question where everyone agreed was if they voted to pull back their support for the TMT, would you be disappointed? And everyone agreed on that, and in fact, that's the thing that they did. So it was a very strange thing, picking the exact worst thing that they could do that everybody
No one was
hate.
happy.
Yeah, nobody was happy.
Nobody was happy.
So if their intention was to make no one happy, then they succeeded. I'm like Richard. I believe that the possibilities, the future possibilities with the TMT coming are, I think, much outweigh the cultural problems, especially if we can do it in the correct way.
And we'll be getting to details of that as the hour goes on. Dr. Osorio, let me give you this question. This project is 7 years in the making, 7 years of hearings and studies. Why do you think it is that the level of objection hasn't developed to this level until now? What has happened that's changed things?
You know, my opinion is that there are a number of things that are happening in the state and actually in the United States as well, because this movement isn't just a Hawaiian issue. I mean, you have 4 Kanaka Maoli here on this panel, 2 who oppose and 2 who support. And it gives people, I think, the impression that this is just some kind of internal Kanaka Maoli disagreement over policy. But actually environmentalists, policy people, people who are concerned about how governments make decisions in the United States and locally, there have been more and more concerns that essentially any kind of investment idea, fracking, for instance, in the U.S., certain kinds of construction that involve big money, that these somehow overshadow the need to protect, protect environmental laws, protect labor laws, protect all kinds of things within the community. And I think that what you're actually seeing is a real frustration by people here in Hawaii of really unequal access to decision making. And I think that's why you're seeing this played out as a political movement, and they're using their voices really kind of because that's what they're left to do. There's not real access to the decision making.
And was there not the opportunity in the past 7 years to express that frustration, or was there a certain element of the last 7 years that seemed specifically unfair?
Yes, go ahead.
I want to just make a correction here. The 7 years is just sort of a random number, but opposition to development on Mauna Kea has gone on for many years. It actually began in the 70s. In the 80s, Governor Ariyoshi had to intervene and create a committee that produced, I think it's called the 1987 Management Plan. We've been fighting, Mauna Kea, Naina and KAHEA, and many of the others have been fighting for more than 15 years. We've actually stopped as many as 10 telescopes because of the early cases. And so the opposition is, as John said, not only Hawaiian. This is a major environmental, it's supported by major environmental groups, including Anonymous, whom, I'd like to just say something about that action. I mean, they're using the tools that they know to use to help balance power, because power is imbalanced in Hawaii, obviously. And so I just want to say the 7 years, and just so people understand, I admire their action. I just believe we need open communication.
When you say you admire their action, what do you mean?
Well, I admire their tenacity to help balance power where they see an imbalance of power.
The protesters, you mean?
Yeah, the anonymous, and so I just want people to understand that 7 years is 7 years of frustration of having 3 minutes to speak and being told to sit down and being told all of these things. So that's what's really, it shouldn't be a surprise.
Yeah. So you're saying it's been simmering for a long time and it exploded?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Maybe this would be a good time. What is the cultural significance of Mauna Kea? I mean, it holds a very special place. Can you tell us about why this is such an emotional issue for many of the protesters?
I can say from a practitioner point of view, there are many out there with, many schools of knowledge, but from our perspective, Mauna Kea is temple. It is temple of supreme deity and the Amakua, and our ancestors, the burial ground of our ancestors. It's the entranceway to the pole. Which is the realm before the time of light. It has much significance, and there's much practice, such as the practice of the solstice and equinox, which we in particular want to protect against, that we believe the TMT will interfere with. So things like that. So there's huge significance as burial ground of sacred place. And that's what people are objecting to, desecration of sacred place.
All right. Mr. Ha, you spoke earlier about the potential good that this telescope could do for the Big Island. Could you address that, the economic and educational benefits?
Yeah, what I think is that we need to help our students dream big, and but it takes money to get to school, and there's a lot of and with the economic conditions on the Big Island and stuff. So this will help, because if all of us here, we've already got our education, nobody can take it away, but there's some children that cannot afford, and this is what the education fund can do, because education is the great equalizer.
And you'd like to see that. I'm going to address this next question to Dr. Coleman. This is from Al in Makakilo. How would ancient Hawaiians who developed celestial navigation feel about the 30-meter telescope?
Well, I have a particular perspective on that. I mean, I believe that we Hawaiians, if you think about what it is that makes you Hawaiian, it's not hula, it's not oli, it's not listening to your kupuna, it's not, those are all parts of it, but they don't separate us from, say, the Samoans or Tahitians. The thing that makes us Hawaiians is someone of our ancestors came here in a canoe after a 30-day voyage from the South Pacific. That's the only way you get to be Hawaiian. And that canoe was led by an astronomer, by a kahuna ho'okele, a navigator astronomer. And so it's part of who we are. It's so deep in our DNA, in our cultural DNA, that I find it amazing that we still are not just as connected to astronomy.
Why, there are 13 telescopes, am I correct, that are already there. Why does this telescope need to be built? What is it about this telescope that would be special or unique from a science perspective?
Well, we always are trying to see further into the universe, and in order to do that, you actually just have to make a bigger and bigger collecting area. So the 30-meter, while it's going to be about 3 times bigger than the Keck, which is the next largest telescope, it should increase the ability to see by about a factor of 10. So for us, from a science perspective, it allows us to look that much further back into the universe or back into time. Or because of its size, it also allows you to see with better resolution. And so it also is about a factor of 10 to 12 better than any telescope existing now. And we always try to just be able to see better. And So that's the primary reason for the 30 meters, to advance our discovery.
To a new level. Dr. Osorio, do any of those science benefits speak to you or hold merit for you?
Yeah, I'd like to say thank you for asking that question. The science of navigation doesn't just involve astronomy. It involves an intimate knowledge of winds and currents and waves and swells. It involves really a kind of holistic knowledge of how the world operates and how weather operates, and when you take a voyage and when you don't take a voyage. And all of these things were things that our ancestors knew really well. And the really interesting thing about Hawaiian science and knowledge is how almost completely it was demolished by that very Western education that is being celebrated by this telescope. We're not, you know, there are so many sciences in the world, and the science of navigation and the science of sciences of knowing how to live in a small, sort of limited space and take every advantage of the weather, of the water, of the kinds of seasons that we have here in the soils. These are things that Hawaiians, our ancestors built over, you know, the 1,500 years or 2,000 years that we've been here in these islands. And all of this is knowledge that has almost been forgotten, and really, essentially, kind of in the shadow of these huge, I see this as the shadow of these telescopes that basically say, look, this is the knowledge that matters. This is the science that matters. And this will allow us to look, you know, 10 times further into space. Well, okay, so you can do that now when you finish this. But will that be enough?
But I kind of disagree, John. I mean, I don't believe that modern science in any way wiped out traditional science.
It almost did.
No, I think what wiped it out was diseases and the fact that we're 1 in 20.
Then you don't know your history, because actually there were very, very specific kinds of things that were done in the 20th century schools, even in the 19th century schools, to shove that knowledge aside. Really banning of kahuna practices, the banning of the language.
But didn't we give those up ourselves? Didn't we do that?
No, we actually didn't give up our language ourselves.
No, I meant the kahuna practices.
No, there's actually a
weren't the
law in the
kapus
books that prohibit it,
Actually,
actually,
there was,
today.
yeah.
No, there's still one, actually. And I want to say that the thing that we're witnessing is the idea of Western supremacy, the idea that Western science somehow is a more superior way of knowing. What we will lose if the TMT happens is our ability to track the heavens over the 26,000-year cycle, which has been being tracked in perhaps as even Proto-Polynesia for millennia. And so the idea that we had to go back and try to reestablish how that was done and how that was measured, not only from mo'olelo and oral history, but from our kupuna, and then actually to really study it and actually really realign it and see it happen. We had to do that because where it was practiced before was eliminated by the previous telescopes. So what this is doing is pushing us again even further behind. And just, I want to make a correction, there's not 13 telescopes, there's 22. If you count the Smithsonian individual, if you count the VLBA, and if you count the KEX as 1 and 2, there are 22.
So is 22 the proper number? I've read 13, no?
No, the 13 is right, because the individual telescopes never operate as individuals.
Yes, they do.
SMA,
they can. The SMA can operate.
In the SMA, they operate as an interferometer.
But it's half a mile across, and the reason for having the number is not the number, it's the impact. And the SMA is more than half a mile across with all kinds of impact. So it's not righteous to count it as one.
But that's actually not correct. It's a half a mile across, but it isn't. It's a half a mile with little bitty spots that are used.
Up to 24 pads.
So the point is, it's not ruining the entire half a mile across. It's just those little spots that have been altered.
But it did eat into the pu'u, and it is this whole area that was.
Well, we've had this discussion before. The telescope is a combined entity. It's not they're not separate telescopes.
But its impact, see, the 13 were not only the number, but the impact. So the TMT would not match also the height and dimension of the limits that are set in the 87 report. and the 2000 didn't override it. Sorry.
All right, I'm sure we'll keep coming back to these issues. Mr. Ha, I wanted to ask you, so there is this movement now to potentially reverse the approvals and this fight against it. If that were to be successful, if this project were to be sidelined, what do you think that reversal could potentially say to the world about doing business in Hawaii, rule of law in Hawaii? Do you have any concerns about that?
Yes, I do. You know, it'll be just another thing that happens that shows that Hawaii is not a good place to do business. You know, and you can't trust the agencies to say what they, you know, to depend on the agencies. The reason I'm worried about it is because we, you know, on the Big Island, I mentioned about the median family income. We need to diversify our economy, because coming up in the future, and not too distant future, is the effects of running out of declining petroleum products. And when that happens, it's going to make this situation become very small, because the social impact will be huge on the people of Hawaii.
I'm getting question after question from people asking why not repurpose an existing observatory in all different forms. So let me go back to you, Dr. Osorio. Would you, and then I'd like to ask you, Dr. Coleman, if that's even possible, would some sort of repurposing of an existing or taking down of obsolete satisfy in some way some of the resistance to this and open the possibility of going ahead and building this 30-meter telescope?
I feel as though when people ask that question, they're wondering whether or not people are willing to negotiate some kind of way that the TMT can exist. And you know, my own opinion, certainly the opinion of KAHEA, is there isn't a way for that to happen. The impact of this structure is, even if it were to be relocated on other older structures that presumably would have to be restored, I guess, first to their original state and then redone so that somehow this could be built, makes little sense to me. The impact of this right, huge building is one of the things that we object to. Essentially, you know, I don't, and because I don't think that that's a negotiable thing. I think the
size, the 18 stories.
Yes. I think that what we are actually in the middle of, and a more important issue for people than whether this thing gets built or not, is really what is the future of economic development in Hawaii, in the state, on that island. What is the future, and how do we make decisions about them? Because one of the things that KAHEA has been fighting has been the way this has been allowed, despite the fact that there are really clear violations of the CDUP in awarding this. This is one of the things we're complaining about. It's kind of the unraveling of the kinds of protections, legal protections, that are there for conservation in the first place. Those are the large issues. Those are the things that I really am going to always insist on keeping our eyes on.
Let me read these two comments. From Neil in Waimea, I can't believe the opposition to a clean, well-meaning project. I don't see where there's a problem. And then from Rosemary in Honolulu, it is totally absurd to put another telescope on Mauna Kea. It won't give us food or water. It doesn't feed the people. We have a dying planet. The scientists should be looking down, not to the stars. Dr. Coleman, why should people care about the stars, as this caller has asked?
Well, I can only speak for myself, but I certainly am very much interested in the universe and what's going on out there. I am also very interested in taking care of people here on Earth, and so I definitely wouldn't, for example, say someone couldn't work because of a project that I'm trying to start. But I think it's just something in our nature, all of us, even the hardest against astronomy types would say that in the dark of night, they're wondering what's going on up above us. And this telescope may allow us to try to figure some of that out. It may not. But it's the only method that I know to go beyond. what we can see with our eyes.
Mr. Ha, do you have any thoughts on that? Why should people care about this telescope?
Well, I always come back to the effect on the people, yeah? And I'm a big advocate for what I call the rubber slipper folks. And too often they're not, you know, their plight is not considered. You know, right now, the astronomy provides close to $100 million into the Big Island economy. You know, the 30-meter telescope was probably going to add another 26 million. 300 jobs in construction, 140 permanent jobs. But the thing that really I look at is the benefit, the educational benefit, because you know, it's not going to be instantaneous that you're going to get all these people qualified, because it takes a while. By the time you get to college, if you're not prepared, you're not ever going to be, you know, a science, technology, and stuff like that. You got to prepare them from small. So it's going to be a long. You got to work hard, and it's not going to be instantaneously, but we got to start somewhere. And what I like about the 30-meter telescope is they understand this. So they're starting with the kids.
All right, I'd like to address this next question to Ms. Pisciotta. Comment for the panel. Hawaiians were once leaders in aquaculture, agriculture, astronomy. Desecration is a crime, and the greatest is denying ability for future generations to learn and explore astronomy. From David and Kaneohe. Do you have any sense of the loss of educational opportunities if this telescope were not to go forward as planned?
No, not at all, because under the law, first thing, it's a conservation district. Conservation districts have rules. TMT admits that the impact of 30 years astronomy, actually this was NASA's who took into account TMT also, 30 years of astronomy development has resulted in adverse, significant, and substantial impact. TMT's EIS has to reiterate that because NASA's EIS was a federal one, the only one ever done. And so when someone says it's a clean science, well, theoretically, but their own EIS is admitting that the impact is adverse and significant and substantial. If that's the case, it means it's not good for the environment, it's not good for the land, and it's not good for the culture. They're already admitting that. So that's number one. Number two, I'm sorry, what, that question was kind of long.
I think what they're asking is that the greatest loss would be for future generations to learn and explore.
No, okay, I got it, right. Education. First thing, they need to be paying rent. That's the law. See, these things are laws. So what's stopping the telescope and what has stopped the development for 15 years is the law, actually. So when people are saying, well, why can't you just let it happen? Well, you know, the law doesn't let it happen. And so in this case, the law requires fair market lease rent to be paid on ceded lands. That would go into the general education fund. That is not happening from any of the telescopes. They're paying $1. So in the general, if it were going into the general fund, it addresses health, education, and housing. That's where the money would come from for education. The think tank is what only, the think fund is what they choose to give, but it's not in compliance with the law because it needs to be fair market. And Yale paid $12 million for 10 days alone. So they need to be evaluating the fair market. I'm all for education, and nobody's, yeah.
All right, tonight we're discussing whether the 30-meter telescope should be built on Mauna Kea. Please call, email, or tweet your questions and comments. Call 973-1000 if you live on Oahu, and 800-238-4847 if you're on a neighbor island. Dr. Osorio, you looked as if you wanted to add to that.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in on this. So what you're really looking at here, you know, the promises of economic benefits, the promises of better education, what Kealoha is saying is that if in fact the telescopes are paying fair market value, you could actually see how that might actually take place. But that's not what's happened here. Mauna Kea is a cheap, accessible, best viewing plane kind of place for this, for the establishment of these telescopes, and this has been justification enough for DLNR, and in the past for OHA, and for state agencies basically to clear the way. And we're being told, as I think people have always been told, that if it's good for the economy, That's really as far as we want anyone to analyze this. Sugar was good for the economy, whaling was good for the economy, sandalwood was good for the economy. All of these things are basically, and actually what they were really good for every single time were a handful of investors, landowners, business people. They weren't necessarily good for people. And I know that this is a hard thing for people to think about when, as you say, rubber slipper people who have been struggling with a bad economy on Hawaii Island for a very long time. But Richard, how much of that bad economy is really the result of not bringing enough investment money? How much of it is also the fact that so much of the land is either ceded lands or tied up or owned by large estates who are really, really reluctant to open it up to the general market and allow people basically to find new business opportunities.
I come from a different point of view because I went to 5 of these Association for the Study of Pequot conferences, so I'm very well aware of what's happening with declining petroleum products. And you know what the thing is about energy? It's the net energy that counts. It takes energy to get energy. It's the net energy that you get to use for your society. And what's happening today is that's shrinking. And as it shrinks, we're going to have to do the stuff with our own hands unless we start to use technology to leverage the resources that we have. And that's why we need education. And we need to really have our kids start to dream big rather than, because the problem is if you dream small, your dreams might come true.
All right. Dr. Coleman, could you address this issue? Are telescopes paying enough?
Well, the way the $1 lease came about was because, historically, Hilo was wiped out by a tsunami. And so they started looking for a way in which to bring new technology, new business into Hilo. And that led to telescopes on the mountain. It started off as one, then it got to be more. But that $1 is a historical fact that just got tied to the 65-year lease. So what can we do legally? Well, we can ask the telescopes if they would please like to instead renegotiate and pay more money, but that usually doesn't happen right off. But the TMT itself, that's why I don't understand your guys' comments, because the TMT plans to pay rent, plans to pay a lease at fair market value that it will increase as their footprint on the mountain grows, until when it's actually running, they'll be paying $1 million a year. And it'll go to all those agencies that you're talking about. It goes, so I don't understand your objection to the TMT. I can see it for the KEC or Gemini or Subaru, but they're part of that old
So, Ms. Pisciotta, is the anger directed towards telescopes? Is it because of this residual issue, and is the 30-meter in fact stepping up?
Let me be clear. I mean, for me as a Hawaiian, the money is irrelevant, because it's the sanctity of the mountain, it's the sacredness. But if it is required by law, then it needs to be done. And a good example of why this is a problem is because the company I used to work for, well, it's actually the government, the British, Dutch, and Canadian government, which was the Joint Astronomy Center, just pulled out. And the university gave it to Lockheed Martin, okay? In that transaction, there was nothing paid by those governments for the use of our mountain. And that's ridiculous. And it is ridiculous. It's a slap in the face to the other offenses, which are even more egregious. So, it would be great, Paul, if we could choose to just pay the landlord what we want, but the requirements under the law require an independent assessor.
But that's what the JCMT, that's what the 30-meter is doing. They're paying what's required by law.
No, they're not, because they hired their own assessor, and that violates the law too. It has to be an independent. Right. Well, he basically got up and said the mountain's not worth anything. It's just a bunch of rocks.
But he wasn't hired by them.
He was hired by them.
By Mauna Kea management.
Well, no, he was actually hired by them. And anyways, who's on Office of Mauna Kea Management?
let's get to the management issue. That was discussed today during the OHA hearing. Do some of these problems in terms of this specific telescope stem from long-standing feelings towards the management of the area? Dr. Osorio?
They certainly didn't help. You know, the TMT basically, and this is something that I think Richard pointed out in a news article not long ago, that essay that you guys wrote, that basically TMT is trying to make up for years and years of mismanagement, and is trying to do this right. And I, you know, I'm not going to. I don't know the intricacies of this enough to comment on whether or not it's really completely doing it right. It's still in violation, however. There are adverse, it's admitting to adverse, you know, and significant adverse impacts. And that then is a violation of one of these rules of the CDUP. The question over and over again comes to be, why do they get an exception? Why did we understand why all of the other telescopes, you know,
right,
screwed up the mountain? Because nobody paid attention, even when we were challenging them in court. Nobody made this a big enough issue. But why does TMT get an exception? And the obvious answer is $1.4 billion is why. And you know, honestly, for at least for some people in Hawaii, that's not a good answer. It's not a good answer.
All right, while we're on economics, Mr. Ha, this is from Cowie Lucas. Vast majority of TMT jobs going to Canadians. Is that the case, or will the new telescope employ local people, as another viewer asks?
The TMT wants to, they're starting a workforce pipeline. And what they're doing is, by first light 10 years from now, they're looking back to middle school, high school, so that they get trained to do the jobs. So they are doing that, and I'd like to say that as a business model, you know, when people are suspicious of large businesses, the 30-meter telescope folks are different. They're much, much different. They're over there trying to do good for the community. I know, because I know those folks. They're the president of the 30-meter telescope is a person I feel like I can do business with on a handshake. You know, some people you can do that with, some people you got to bring lawyers. They're not like that.
So you feel that they will be good stewards in the community?
I've seen that, and I've talked to them, and I know what they're trying to do. You know, even the Think Fund, they let us do the management of the Think Fund. I was on the subcommittee, and we pushed it so we could get Hawaiian students to get 2 bites of the apple. We pushed it as hard as we could go,
all right,
and they let us go.
Dr. Coleman, let me ask you this question. What are the biggest misconceptions about the 30-meter telescope?
Well, the biggest misconception I can think of is that it's not needed, that it will be, that its position will be easily filled by other telescopes, or that, in fact, we could easily move it from current plans for Mauna Kea to somewhere else.
And why could we not? Like, can you explain?
Well, already a lot of money has been invested in site development, site preparation. Mauna Kea is, I don't care what people say, it's the best place in the world to actually set this telescope down. And the northern plateau, while it isn't as great as, for example, the crater rim or up at the summit, it still is fantastic and the best place in the world for it.
And am I correct in that the reason it's not going to be up is out of consideration for the visual aspect of this?
Yeah, originally they had thought that perhaps they could go up to the rim line and just take one of the other telescopes out, you know, replace it. And there are plans within the Mauna Kea management plan that allows for replacing telescopes. They're supposed to come in at the same footprint on the ground, but also a three-dimensional footprint. Well, so one of the original thoughts was maybe we could put it up on the ridgeline, but then that would be, we felt would be just too much.
Too visual.
Too visual, and by putting it down on the North Plateau, it can only be seen really from sort of one aspect in Waimea, and So it was, in fact, at first a compromise to reduce the effectiveness of the site by going to a lower elevation.
Dr. Zara, is there any appreciation in the opposition side in terms of those sorts of concessions to try to find a location that is more suitable, or is that irrelevant to you?
No, that just suggests to me that actually that people who are planning the future of the mountain are really considering, you know, what happens next after TMT as well. I mean, you know, where else can you actually build on this mountain? I wanted to, you know, sort of connect that to what Richard was saying earlier about the education and the sciences and training people on Hawaii to be able to take part, you know, in the technological development with regard to telescopes. It really, you know, it strikes me that what we're trying to do is create this kind of industry here, which will then, you know, I mean, this is just my rational side saying this means that TMT is probably not the last one that's going to be built. And as these others come online, they may be replaced by others, maybe not as big as TMT, maybe having a different kind of technology, but that this is what is being envisioned for the summit of that mountain, for the, for the long-term future. And this is why I say this is an important decision for people to make, and it's about the sanctity of the mountain. It's about the economy of Hawaii Island. It's about the future of education. You know, when I started at the University of Hawaii, there were fewer than 5% of the people at Manoa were Native Hawaiians. Now more than 12% are. And we did all of this without telescope money. We have improved Hawaiians present in higher education, and the educational system for Hawaiians has been improved dramatically, I think in part because of things like Hawaiian studies. You know, we just need to be really, really clear about the reasons we do things.
Dr. Coleman, do you think there will be more telescopes after this one?
No, I'm pretty sure it's the last one. There may be, it's the last, I should say it's the last new site. Some of the older ones may actually get recycled. But the current plan in the long-range plan of things is to actually decrease the number of telescopes up there from, 13 to something like 6 or so. But one of those 6 will probably be the 30-meter. I think just from, if you think about it just from the perspective of economics, you know, $1.4 billion, you can get that maybe once in your life, but I don't believe that in the next, even in the next 50 years, that we'll ever have this happen again.
This opportunity. All right.
Can I say something to
this?
Yes,
please.
First of all, I'd just like to say the TMT can't fit on the summit. That's more the reason why. But I'd like to really get away from discussion of all the economics, and I'd like to remember a quote from Paul Nevis, which is that desecration is not education. I mean, what we're missing here in this discussion here is that it is desecration. And desecration is unlawful in Hawaii. It's against the law. And desecration is an act of defacing, destroying any place of veneration, any monument, any burial ground. That's what's happening on Mauna Kea. I want to bring it back to what the protectors are trying to protect against is desecration. And in Hawaii, it's $10,000 fine, 1 year in prison and or both. But nobody's enforcing that. And yet, it's exactly desecration in the law, HRS 711-1107.
So is the bigger issue here some of the wrongs of the past, sovereignty? This is a mail from Kakako. Is the illegal overthrow of the Hawaiian monarchy and annexation the crux of the Mauna Kea issue? Because this is ceded land and UH is the steward of the land who has legal ownership. I mean, is that really at the base of this? That
is definitely a question. Title is a question. This is ceded lands, but the main thing is that Mauna Kea is a sacred place, and what is happening is desecration. And nobody seems to be bothered by that. But if someone were running outside and burning a flag, and it would outrage many people, obviously what we're seeing today is that outrage, but at least in Hawaii, we're choosing to handle it with aloha. But don't make mistake, this is outrage, because it is an outrageous act to continue to do that. And we have asked and asked and asked. And so this reaction that is happening is a visceral response to true aloha, actually.
All right. I'm going to start getting through some of our questions because we're actually nearing the end of the show. For Mr. Ha, if we send the message to potential companies that Hawaii is not a scientific, technology, and business-friendly environment, how would you suggest we allow our young people on this economically depressed island to succeed and become financially secure to be able to continue to live on the Big Island without moving to the mainland? Would it be to continue in service jobs and tourism, jobs building multi-million-dollar homes for people which locals cannot afford? From Liz Chalk.
Yeah, it's a real problem. If we don't find and diversify our economy, that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to rely on the military, we're going to rely on tourism, and then we're going to rely on the government. But as oil prices rise, the government is going to tax us more, and they won't be able to take care of the rubber slipper folks. So what we need is trickle up economics, not trickle down economics. If we can figure out a way for the rubber slipper folks to make money, then they'll spend. 2/3 of the economy is made up of consumer spending.
All right, Dr. Coleman, I'd like to ask you, what stage is in the project are we at? You had addressed, could it still be moved elsewhere without excessive cost? Where is the project actually at this moment?
Well, right now, I guess there's one legal case that's still pending, but the TMT group has received all permits, etc., and the governor has actually given them the go-ahead to start building. So they have the legal right to build, and I guess they're withholding. They're trying to see if we can work something out, or if we can get to some compromise that doesn't involve putting people in jail for blocking work. But so the only thing that's in fact still waiting, but still you're allowed to proceed, is the one last legal challenge.
So Dr. Osorio, let me ask you this. Are you saying no compromise on this? Absolutely not. The project needs to be stopped by whatever means necessary, the legal means, and if there is economic penalty in terms of a countersuit because the project was stopped, do you think that's worth the price? Or do you see any room for compromise here? I think
it would be a terrible price to pay, and I know exactly who would be responsible for this. It would be, the generations of policymakers who refused to basically listen when we were pointing out problems with this project from the very, very beginning. Let's look at this a little bit differently. Is this one of those too big to fail kinds of situations? And consider how many Americans were really furious with the government's decision to bail out banks in 2008 because they were too big to fail, because even though those people had been the very people who had brought the United States to the brink of economic crisis. I really honestly think that people have to, this is not just about this particular decision. It's about how we make decisions about land use in Hawaii. Been saying this all along. KAHEA has been really killer about it.
So you're saying no compromise, it just cannot be built, period. And whatever comes of it in terms of the fallout.
That's what I believe.
I have to go back to you, Dr. Coleman. Is that even possible? The agreements are in place. I mean, I know there is a legal case pending, so that would seem to be the only place where it might truly stop. Or is it too late for legal?
I'm not a lawyer, so I can only say that, look, millions of dollars have been spent, and contracts have been written and signed, so this would be in some way very, very bad for the state of Hawaii.
Mr. Ha?
The 30-meter telescope is being financed by different countries, and they're pooling their money together. This is not your regular, what you think of as a big business, like a manufacturing. It's not that. What it is a big nonprofit. And they're just throwing money in, and it's discretionary money. So if the economy goes south because of oil and energy, and it'll affect the whole world, we're going to be wishing that we had something, money coming in, because this is free money.
One thing I've heard raised quite a bit is that this telescope too could become obsolete, that telescopes will just keep getting bigger. Is that the case?
I can't, I mean, economically I can't see how it would be possible. And historically I can think back to a different wavelength regime. So in radio telescopes they kept building bigger ones until they reached a certain size, and then the cost versus effectiveness curve or something came up and they said, no, we can't go any bigger. But then we figured out how to make a bunch of little telescopes that can mimic a big one. And I think the same kind of technology leap is going to happen in optical, and we're not going to build a bigger one than the 30 meter or the current ones that are going down in Chile. I just can't imagine that, for one thing, that people would have enough money to spend on this. And I also believe we got smart kids. They're going to figure this out, and we're going to have interferometers instead, which is exactly what happened in the radio. The radio stopped building. Their last big telescope was a giant telescope in West Virginia. And since then, we've only been building interferometers, little telescopes.
Ms. Pisciotta, do you see any opportunity for any kind of progress or movement in terms of finding some sort of answer to this standoff?
I think it's a legal issue. The fact that they admitted that the impacts adverse should have been the first clue to BLNR not to issue the lease or the CDUP. You know, we keep talking about all of these wonderful things, except for the part where it's not legal. I mean, the rules are in plain English, you can read them. And they say if the project has adverse or significant impact, it may not get, the box doesn't get checked, they can't pass on. So that's what our case is about. And why do we have that case is because, like John said, this is conservation district. A lot of land in Hawaii is in conservation. The Haleakala case is in the Supreme Court now. The Supreme Court accepted it. So, and it has very similar issues as ours. So obviously the courts believe that these issues have merit and are taking them. And it's because these are serious land use issues.
Dr. Coleman, are there any concerns from the opposition that you think are warranted, that changes that, and Mr. Hall, let me ask you this. From the opposition, the comments that you're hearing, what makes sense to you? What changes would make sense down the line on Mauna Kea? Any thoughts of better management, more outreach to the Native Hawaiian community?
Well, I think those things are all important. Better management that's been a complaint from the beginning of time. But I think also just education. We just have to make a better case for what we're doing. We have to, in fact, try to understand how this can and cannot work. I think that all Kanaka Maoli have to decide, each one has to decide whether the mountain is too sacred to build on. And if their answer is it is, then we have a much harder time trying to find any further common ground. But if the answer is, well, okay, I could imagine it if I can think of it in terms of something my ancestors would do, or something that gives us more empowerment as a people, then those are things worth talking about.
We're in our final moments. Let me go to this comment from John in Waimea. Why is building a telescope on a small plot on Mauna Kea desecration when just a mile or so away the U.S. military is bombing and blasting a huge area, Pohakuloa, of the same sacred mountain that isn't being protested? Let me follow that question with, do you think that the protests that we've seen, the energy we've seen around this is going to spread to other issues, to other controversial developments?
I'd like to say, to address that issue, is that's being litigated. Auntie Maxine and Uncle Ku have that case going on against PTA.
Do you think the energy will spread to other issues, other developments? Are we going to start to see sort of a no, we've had enough development coming from the Native community and other sectors? I
think that the Mauna Kea issue is a pinnacle issue that helps address all of our issues island-wide. It's the frustration island-wide that is rising up, and actually people are saying we're free and we're not going to go back. We're free to be aloha and we're free to live our culture in the way we want.
Okay, we're in our final moment. Mr. Howe, what do you think?
I'm really concerned about, you know, Hawaiians used to look 7 generations down, yeah? So we really need to be looking down the road, what is going to be happening under various different scenarios. And the scenario I keep on bringing up is energy. What happens in 20 years when we cannot afford the oil and gas? Now, with money just coming in from the outside, that's a free one. You know, tourism is going to be in trouble, and we'll be in trouble. So I'm very concerned about the planning. We haven't done the planning.
Okay, we're in our final moment. Dr. Osorio.
We haven't done the planning, and we need to do a lot more planning.
Yeah.
And one of the decisions we have to make is, are we willing to sell this mountain for $1.4 billion? Because that's essentially what we're talking about here. This project should be stopped. People need to step back and figure out how we use land in general.
Dr. Coleman, let me give you the final word. Your thoughts. Do you think the project will move forward?
Well, I hope it will. I hope we can come to some kinds of understandings, but obviously some members don't feel that way. But I feel that I can say one thing. If that telescope's up there, there won't be any restaurants built up there. There won't be any McDonald's. There will be no hotels. Investing in astronomy means that that mountain stays for astronomy.
All right. Thank you all for an interesting and very civil conversation. It was a good talk. For decades, tourism has been a primary driver of Hawaii's economy, with visitors contributing $1.5 billion to the state's tax revenue in 2013 alone. But the reliance on tourism, which supports more than 17% of our jobs, makes the state especially vulnerable to economic shifts, wars, and natural disasters outside the islands. Can Hawaii still rely on the visitor industry? That's next time on Insights on PBS Hawaii. I'm Malia Mattoch. Ahui ho.